A Hollywood screenwriter is explaining how the woke diversity hires will be out of jobs under the new WGA deal. Screenwriter Script Doctor, he's an anonymous screenwriter, recently asserted that woke diversity hires will be out of jobs under the newly minted deal that the Writers Guild of America signed with the studios. During an appearance on Midnight's Edge in the Morning, this past Friday, Script Doctor shared his thoughts. He was asked by the show's host, Andre Einharar, will there be less jobs for writers now when you have guaranteed writer's room? And this is how Script Doctor responded. He said, well, this is one of the things I didn't like in regards to the guaranteed writer's room because you have compelled hiring. But it looks like certain members in the union on the negotiating committee have turned that inside out a little bit for the benefit of writers that know how to finish a script, and maybe not push too much ideology in there. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely some veteran writers out there that are drinking the Kool-Aid, but the vast majority of them, the ones that do preach this, are younger. I've been learning through my colleagues that a lot of them have actually spent more time striking and spending time on social media than actually expanding their portfolio of scripts to pitch when the strike is over. That appears to be something that has been confirmed by Deadline's Nellie Andreeva in her report, where she said a lot of the individuals, the writers, were actually striking on the picket lines, and instead of actually getting to work on potential pitches that they are going to try and sell to the studios after the strike was over. After briefly comparing himself to his colleague, he then continued. So basically what we are seeing here from the youngins is there's going to be possibly less opportunities for them, especially in something like the pre-greenlit or mini rooms, and that comes down to two factors that I can think of right now. The first one is that the current NBA clearly defines that a showrunner has to be a union writer. So it can't be an internal executive producer like a Kevin Feige. It also gives them a bit more power to who they select for the writing positions in the minimum staffing mini rooms. And it also says that whoever they select has to be approved by the company, or the showrunner has to argue for them to be involved. Now, with regards to those rooms, you have showrunners that would only, a real showrunner, a good showrunner, is only going to hire writers that they are going to get value out of in their room, which means that if you are a diversity hire, and that's all you've got going on, you are of no value to a showrunner, which means you are not going to get your guaranteed hire over there. And I think that's a good thing. As for his second point, he said the other aspect with regards to the contract pertaining to mini rooms is that the compelled hiring has now increased, the compelled hiring in the extended time frame for which they have to work on the show, which is like the minimum of 10 weeks. That essentially turns the mini room into something more expensive than the traditional model of developing a pilot, producing the pilot to be screened before an audience test to see whether or not it's actually going to be good, and then giving it the green light to go into an actual series order. The mini room basically tries to force a hit show within a 6-episode or 8-episode or 10-episode structure, get it all written before any of it is filmed, and then push it out there. He then provided an example of Ahsoka. He says, you can take a look at a pilot like Ahsoka and say to yourself, okay, that's a show that was done in a mini room. It was done by one writer, Dave Filoni. And if you put that through the pilot test, there's no way it would have been picked up for the remainder of the episodes, and that's a good thing. You don't want that. I think we can agree on that. The opening episode of Ahsoka was just poor, and I don't think that would have passed muster. So right now, it looks like mini rooms are kind of being, for the moment, they'll be kind of priced out on a budget side of things from the studios because it's more lucrative and less risk for them to actually go back to shooting a pilot, testing it, and then determining whether it's going to be given a series order, as opposed to building a show in a limited amount of time and then just pumping it out for you to be stuck with it and can't control, develop, or change it based on audience reception. And I think that a lot has to do with like set building and things like that, where you actually are, if you have the whole written show out, then you have to like build a whole new sets for it. And I think with the pilot test, you wouldn't actually be building all of that test. You wouldn't have as many sunk costs. I'm sure there's other factors that go into that, but I think that's probably one of the bigger ones. You don't have that huge sunk cost, production cost for a lot of this stuff. Obviously, they're trying to limit what that sunk cost is by using Lucasfilm's volume and other types of sets that are similar to it, using similar technology. But Script Doctor then asserted, and when you have those types of orders and you have the showrunner being in charge of it and picking the writers they want to work with and being able to argue why they need it for the benefit of the show, you then basically exclude any of the writers in town that are not going to be of value to you. And I think everybody listening and gentlemen on the panel know these types of writers are not going to be lasting in this industry because they're not qualified. And I think that's great. I think that's great that there's less jobs for them because that gives me a better chance for having more job opportunities. He's not beating around the bush there. He knows that them losing out on opportunities is more opportunities for him. And I think that kind of flies in the face of the whole idea of like, oh, we're not trying to actually replace you, except that's indeed what they were doing. They're not bringing more seats to the table, especially when there's only a certain number of seats there when you're limiting the amount of shows, right? But then he goes on and he then responded to a comment from Andre Einharar, who said, let's face it, a big part of the problem that we've had, especially with the MCU of late, isn't just the producers behind the scenes who have gone nuts. We can point to Victoria Alonso. It is also that the writers' rooms are staffed with incompetent and general assorted activists, many of whom would be these younglings, if you will, that come in not through merit but through other means and produce a bunch of BS. Script Doctor replied saying, if it's not through merit, they've done something that's made them hot in the moment. And when you have basically the studios clamoring at them to work for them for writing, they overbook themselves or overstretch themselves. And then they end up becoming terrible because they've signed 9 deals that are due over the next year and a half or 2 years to turn in. Trying to write 9 feature films in 2 years is a really difficult thing to do, especially if they are going to be maintaining quality. And on top of that, you're putting them out there, you're getting notes back, you're going back and forth, you're dividing a lot of your time. This is the big red flag I pointed out, especially with Dave Callahan. He's written Wonder Woman 1984, Zombieland 2, Mortal Kombat, and Shang-Chi. Those 4 movies alone came out within a year of each other, and they were all terrible. But he was a hot-ticket item writer for the studios. Switching from theatrical to television, he then commented, now, if we are going to have a little bit less, especially on the television side of things, where they're not going to be producing as many shows, that has a benefit because it's getting more into quality over quantity. I mean, we've heard this preached before, obviously, with Star Wars, especially in theatrical. But when you're looking at TV, I'll believe it when I see it. I think like a lot of like we're talking about, if you still have really bad writers there, you're not going to be improving your quality. Even if you reduce the number you're writing, you're still going to have poor quality with bad writers, right? So I think you have to change that. And then obviously you have to change. We obviously know that there's producers and other people up the food chain there that are also really bought into a lot of this stuff and trying to push that in there as well. So you'd have to change a lot of that stuff too. So just because you're reducing quality doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be increasing quality. But Script Doctor does provide a convincing argument here as to why the quality will be increasing if you are indeed reducing quantity, because there is a monetary factor that gives you a bonus basically on the residual end that incentivizes you to actually create really good shows that people are actually going to tune into. So he says on top of that, maybe there's a chance that you guys out there in the audience will actually start seeing other shows that are not being pushed solely by Disney and also some of the other networks. That would be a good thing because there's probably a lot out there that you haven't seen yet that might actually be of your fancy. So it backfired against the woke. That's great. He then goes on to talk about this kind of 20% incentive, residual incentive that you get if your show is watched by 20% of the subscriber base of the streaming service, then you get a residual bonus that's automatically built in to this WGA deal. But he says a number of the members of the current WGA board that were expecting this to lead to hiring of those types hires are disappointed to learn about this. However, they are probably also prominent enough in the industry to get a show here and there. So they will be, of course, hiring that. So you'll most likely have those types of shows peppered throughout still for a bit. So he's cautioning here that this isn't going to be happening overnight, but he's also saying that he does think this is going to be happening. And he said, here's the other part too. This is what I've been talking about here. Here's the other part too. Because of the new residual metric, the more money you get comes based on the fact that you have to obtain 20% of the subscriber viewership or more in order for you to make the most amount of money. So if you care about making money as a writer, that means you have to make a good show. And I think that's actually key there too. You have to care about making money because some of these people might not actually care about making money. They might actually be interested in the agenda, the power, the control. That might be where they get their rocks off, and they're not so much interested in about making their money. But I do think that is a big incentive, and I think could potentially change what we see. And he goes on and says, and you will soon see that certain habits, such as the stuff that we can point to Disney doing, is not going to be very profitable. And it'll be a difficult time for some of those writers that get those opportunities to learn a lesson. And it'll be a difficult time for us as an audience being exposed to those shows. And then, of course, turning them off and trying to find something else. And that's a good thing. It's basically like their desire to want more money based on those residuals has forced them to basically say, we actually have to do a good job now. And I think that's great. So it looks to me that irony has prevailed in regards to the quality of the work is predicated on the merit of the show and how well that appeals to an audience and gains viewership. He then declared, once I think enough of the industry learns that rule, everyone else will start benefiting from it, at least on the entertainment side of things. So I definitely found his comments really interesting and wanted to share them with you if you hadn't seen this already. I'm really interested to see what you guys think of this. Do you actually think that this monetary incentive for these writers' room is actually going to change the quality of these shows? Are we still going to be stuck with the same quality, even though they're reducing the number of shows that they're going to be making. We've seen this from Bob Iger, we've seen this from Kevin Feige. We're seeing this at Lucasfilm too, I think. So I think we're going to see it across the board. I think Netflix has made announcements that they're cutting back. Amazon is looking at how many shows that they're doing and the costs that they're doing, so they're going to be cutting back as well. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts on this. Leave a comment below. Do you think that this new deal and these new monetary incentives that are now in place for these writers, will that indeed change the quality of these shows that we are getting? And do you think this will incentivize good showrunners to create good products that actually a lot of people want to watch and partake in, instead of getting something like She-Hulk or Ahsoka or Obi-Wan Kenobi, things like that people tune in maybe early on, and then even like a She-Hulk, they didn't even tune in early on. They just noped out immediately. But people with Obi-Wan tuned in early on and then noped out once they saw how absolutely terrible it was. So I'm really curious to know what you guys make of this. Leave a comment in the comments below.
Subscribe for more.